This is the kind of thing we're talking about, right?
Yeah, it is. And we've noticed two patterns with priests, and again, the first is this guy was fairly young, so he was probably involved with this before he became a priest, and so more than likely, I mean, I don't know the guy's particular history, but we've noticed that there's two kinds of priests, those who are actually involved in it before, and that's actually one of the reasons they went into the priesthood, is because they were able to use even the priesthood itself by committing sacrilege in relationship to sacraments. They have their own supply of hosts, they never had to steal them or anything like that, etc. And to just priests doing it is such a sacrilege that in their mind it empowers them in relationship to the diabolic much more than, say, someone who's not. But we've also come across some priests who started out okay, but they usually had some kind of moral problem, usually in the area of the Sixth Commandment, and then by the time they get done, they get kind of sucked into the satanic ritualistic side of it. And so we're seeing both of those kinds of priests that are involved.
Cardinal McCarrick molested, that I know of, at least twice in a sacral environment. One was in the sacristy in relation to Christmas. The other was James Brine in the context of penance confession. Does that qualify for satanic ritual abuse? That there's not a satanic ritual happening, but it's happening in the context of a sacrament?
Yeah, I mean, satanic ritual abuse usually, though, implies that there's a specific ritual that the Satanist is going to enact at this particular moment, and I don't, without knowing the details of those specific things, it sounds to me that, because that's public knowledge, right? I mean, you can just read that stuff about what actually happened. In those particular cases, it sounds to me more like it was he was more of an opportunist than anything else, at least in those particular circumstances. I don't know about the rest of that particular aspect of his life. I don't have certain knowledge about any of that, but it's we probably wouldn't say it's satanic ritual abuse, but we would say it's diabolic in the sense that it's so disordered that it's something that Satan would easily get involved or inspire.
What I've heard is McCarrick lost his Cardinals hat because they were able to get him not just breaking the Sixth Commandment, but breaking it in a sacred environment. That's what got him.
Right.
Thankfully, it's sad that it takes that much to do something like that.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, a lot of Malachi Martin and others have talked about that at some point in the 60s there was some sort of improvement of Satan. Diabolical infiltration.
Turn left on Inkster Road.
I hint at it, my book Infiltration, but I don't go too far on it because I don't know the details. That something happened in the Vatican where you have Freemasons, occultists, whatever you want to call these people, definitely to Satan, enthroning Satan. Now, what does that mean? You talk about people can be possessed, animals, right, can have demons in them, places,
right.
Homes.
In a quarter of a mile, turn right on Walnut Lake Road.
What would that even mean?
Well, yeah. So basically, to enthrone Satan in a particular location basically means it's the inversion of, like, for example, the enthronement of the Sacred Heart or the Immaculate Heart. And so basically, what you're doing is you're setting him up as the ruler or king or principality or power in that particular location.
Turn right on Walnut Lake Road.
So you're doing a specific ritual which empowers him so that he can influence those in the region or in the area, basically. It's essentially going to land. You yourself are taking him as your ruler or guide in that context. So that's the actual structure.
And as I understand it, Satanists do this in all kinds of geographies, right? Taking up space.
Yes. Yeah, there's a couple of ways they do the enthronements. The other thing is they open up, it's very difficult.
In 3.9 miles, turn left on Centaur Drive.
Coming across these things personally, details and stuff that would be sensationalized. There has been more than one source that has come out and confirmed what is contained in that book. Even the bishop in South Carolina, where the ritual took place, because it was done by a form of projection, even where the ritual took place, the bishop there did research, found out it was true, and then reconsecrated the church. So there is, because the information is in the archives, and so this is one of those things that, again, without getting too sensationalized, I think it gives us an indicator that it would be naive, let me just put it this way, it would be naive for people in the church to not think that the primary target of the Satanists wouldn't be the Vatican. They're just going to go after it to the degree that they can.
In war, you go for the capital city.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I've heard not saying Father Reverend, but other bishops have said, yes, something like this happened in the city. Would you comment on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to mention this a little bit in some of my other public discussions of it. And again, some of this stuff we don't know what it is, and other things we don't have absolute certitude about it, all the details, etc. But we do know that something happened in the early 60s, I'll just put it that way. We know something happened in the early 60s, and it's based primarily on what other exorcists had said. So if you listen to the exorcists talking, that were doing exorcisms in the 70s and 80s, who had been doing them for some time, they talk about the fact that something happened in the life of the church in which the time it took to liberate people went from, usually once you got faculties, it was a day or two, sometimes a week. Those were pretty difficult. The case was in St. Louis, originally starting in DC, but ended up in outside of St. Louis, where they processed it. Took 59 days, was almost unheard of in that day and age. But they would go very quickly. An exorcist said that something happened because it was like a light switch. It went from things, you just kick these demons out. It wasn't that much. I mean, you still had to do some work, but they got out pretty easily, and it didn't take that long to all of a sudden, boom, now it took 8 months to 2 years. And so there's this shift that happened in the power that the demons actually had was marked. And so there's all sorts of speculation about what would have caused that, etc. But some exorcists hold that it had to do with that particular event, which Malachi Martin talks about. It's obviously talked about in the context of a fictional work, but as I mentioned, there's been, and you can get them right online, so I'm not saying it's conspiracy theory, I'm not saying anything that's not known publicly. A lot of people may not know about it, but you can go right online and find out about there's several other sources that verify that this particular thing happened. And I have never had a chance to talk to those older guys, mostly because they're mostly dead now, but it would have been nice to be able to find out exactly the timeline that they noticed a shift, because then that would give us some kind of confirmation or not that this was actually the cause of it.
Because if I understand correctly, the power of exorcism does not come necessarily per se from the exorcist.
Right.
It comes from power,
Correct.
penance, fasting, the faith, the health, of the ecclesia,
Right.
the Catholic Apostolic Church. So if you have a weak church, you have a weaker exorcism. Is that true? Is that about it?
No, that's actually the exorcists, even in Rome recently, have been talking about that and stressing the reality of the fact that when you do exorcisms, first of all, what you're doing is you're acting on behalf of the church as a public agent, as an exorcist. So the effect is actually based upon the state of the church. So that's one of the reasons. It's obviously not ex opere operato, because if it was, then you just do the prayer and boom, they'd be out. And so they say, and it's not ex opere operantes in relationship to the priest, even though his sanctity can have some impact. Also, I talk about it in the book that the more experienced the exorcist is, very often the more rapidly he can get demons out. But that's not always the case in each case. But so there can be an element of that. But they say it's ex opere operantes ecclesiae, which Exactly. So that when that I was really surprised they weren't called on the carpet just from the silliness of that revelation. So speaking languages they don't know, and then the other one is occult knowledge.
Turn left on Walnut Lake Road.
They actually know particulars, so it's about particular knowledge about you or some events, sometimes at a distance, about what's actually going on, even though they're not there, they can't see it, or they've never met the person or what have you. That's not too common. You do see that from time to time. They actually know what's going on. One case I actually worked on, that was actually a form of preternatural sign that we knew that this person was possessed because I gave the demon.
In a quarter of a mile, turn right on Centaur Drive. Turn right on Centaur Drive. In a quarter of a mile, turn right on Centaur Drive.
And he immediately executed it exactly as I had told him to do. So, and then as time went on, we started finding all sorts of other forms of occult knowledge. The other form is people who have
turn right on Centaur Drive. Then turn right on Walnut Hills Boulevard.
who have knowledge of the sciences that never studied or that's beyond their capability. So I had one case where this demon was making all sorts of theological distinctions that, unless you're like on your eye level, they are not going to know.
Turn right on Walnut Hills Boulevard. Then turn right on Walnut Circle East.
Just not going to know those, and yet he was just talking about them like they were everyday kinds of things, and this was far beyond the woman's capacity. And then the last category is kind of the catch-all category, which is those things that are beyond human capacity. So things like superhuman strength. The one that we most see the most often is what we call morphing, which they change shape. And that's the one that you tend to see most of the time.
Turn right on Walnut Circle East.
This is structural changes and things looking like, people changing into animals and things of that sort. But it all...
What about heads spinning around?
In 300 feet, you'll arrive.
I mean, they do things that are physically, they appear to be physically impossible, right? Like certain kinds of contortions and things like that. You're just like, yeah, that's not human, right? But sometimes they'll say, well, if you're levitating,
Starting route to 5547 Walnut Circle East. Head north on Walnut Circle East. Then the destination is on your right.
kami naman kasi.
Ate.
Hello, kausap ko. Sandali ate, sandali sandali. Hi!
Hello, ate, hindi ko alam
Saan
kung
ka ba?
ano ba yun?
Marami ka na?
Hindi, nandito na ako. Pumasok ako sa parang parang condominium ba yon?
Yeah, Walnut. Nakalagay ng Walnut.
Kasi
Walnut Center Farm.
Center Farms. I think nandito
Oo.
ako sa may Palomino Court. And dito
Huwag
ba?
kang pumasok dito sa Palomino. Dumiretso ka dito. Lampasan mo yung Palomino.
Nasa stop sign
Ikot
ako
yan.
eh.
Lumabas ka dyan sa Palomino Street.
Nandito ako sa
Tapos mag-right ka.
Walnut Circle East. Anong
Mag-right ka.
560? Anong kulay ba ko
Alik.
Nan
Labas kami pati. Lalabas kami.
556 553 baka malapit na ako. 5751 49. Ayun.
Ito. Di ba siya? Ayun.
Pwede ako din.